What's up, Hokie Nation, and welcome into this edition of Talking with Teel, presented by State Farm. Virginia Tech has two new coordinators, with one being former head coach Brent. Notre Dame gets left out of the college football playoff, and what are the thoughts overall about the 12-team format? All that and much more coming up on this edition of Talking with Teel, which starts right now. And we record on Wednesday, December 10th, 2025 from the Tech Solutions Studio in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Remember to like, subscribe, and refer the show to a friend. I'm your host, Carter Hill. To my left is our senior staff writer, Andy Bitter. Across the way is our managing editor, Mr. David Cunningham. Nick Brown, our director of media, is producing behind the scenes. And as always, we are joined by the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer, David Teel, repping his alma mater, headed to the college football playoff. Good to see you.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. We led off the podcast yesterday with Brent, and I think we got to lead off today's podcast with that as well. The former head coach for the Hokies, less than 3 months after his firing, is going to be Virginia Tech's next defensive coordinator. What are your overall thoughts on the hire, and were you even maybe the taddest bit surprised by James Franklin's first move in Blacksburg?
No, in terms of being surprised. Guys, sitting in the front row next to Andy and David at the press conference when James Franklin was introduced. During his opening remarks, when he had to pause when he started to talk about Coach Pry, I immediately thought, oh my God, he's going to hire Brent on his staff. And that's why the one question I asked in the formal press conference was, what did Coach Pry tell you about this place and this job? And he expounded on it. And then Andy just went there in our breakout session with him and said, is there a place for Brent Pry on the staff? And James Franklin did not dissuade us of the notion, said, of course, that it was up to Brent and his family to decide what was best for their future. And then that afternoon, I texted someone very close to the situation and asked if this were indeed possible. They didn't tell me no. A couple of weeks later, I texted someone else. Is this going to happen? Is this possible? They didn't say yes, but they did not say no. So this is what I have expected. And I think it can work. Is it unique? Absolutely. But this is a unique relationship and a unique situation. And I applaud both parties for it.
Teel, I was kind of the same way. There's an assistant coach in another sport that lives in my neighborhood. At the bus stop one time, we were talking, and he was saying he was at a barbecue and kind of like joking about with Brent Pry, who was there. It was like, you going to come back at all? And he came away. He did not feel like the notion was outlandish in speaking into that. I'm like, oh, I kind of perked up at that point. Like, this could be a possibility. Are you surprised it's the coordinator spot and not like an off-field role or something less visible than where he'll be? Because he's going to be in the spotlight in a defensive coordinator role, or under the microscope, I should say. If stuff goes wrong, people will have that history with Brent Pry that they will point out pretty quickly, I imagine.
I think they will, Andy, as they would for any coordinator. But this is where James Franklin is comfortable with Brent Pry being. He was a darn good coordinator at Vanderbilt and Penn State for James Franklin. And an analyst role just felt like too much of a step down. And to me, I don't know that I've ever seen fans' impression of a fired coach turn on a dime like they did with Brent. And it was all because of James Franklin and how he portrayed Brent's role in his decision to accept the job, where suddenly Brent Pry goes from the coach who could not get us back to ACC prominence to the coach, the man who allowed us or helped to allow us to land James Franklin. And I got a text the other day. I want to read this to you. This is from somebody in the industry who said, man, I really don't understand Franklin's hire of Pry. Feels very, very culturally tone deaf. Why in the world would you want to keep that wound open with the fan base? And why in the world wouldn't Witt understand this too? And I told him, no, you don't get it. The wounds healed that day. And to the fans, Brent Pry's role in this borders on heroic. And my sense is that this has been accepted by the fans with open arms. Maybe you guys can correct me, but that's certainly my impression.
I think that's the case. That's the reaction I've gotten. I think there's still some people out there, they're a little skittish about it, and they're like, I don't know if this whole thing will work, but they want it to work. I think they are eager for it to work. And Teel, I'm curious, you have been around a lot of fired coaches over the years. Have any rehabilitated their image this quickly as Brent Pry has, and been reaccepted by a fan base?
No, I've never seen anything like it. Andy had turned that day. I mean, it was a one-day turnaround, just like that. And for that, I think Brent Pry has James Franklin to thank. And guys, I don't think we can we all knew that the Prys and the Franklins were close. I don't think we realized it was quite like this. I mean, that is a relationship that runs deeper than we imagined. And that's what has led us here. And I, for one, cannot wait for our first media op with Brent. It'll be very interesting. But, man, I have questions.
What do you make of the financial piece of this whole thing? Because the Hokies are set to pay him a $6-7 million buyout. No, it's somewhere in that range. I'm sure there might be an offset of there somewhere in there, but just like such a unique situation where Virginia Tech just fired him in September and paid him this buyout, and now he's going to come back on staff. And just the weirdness of it, the financials. Where is he going to get paid by Virginia Tech now? Is that his buyout? Like, what do you kind of make of that whole thing?
I don't want to be Virginia Tech's accountant, that's for sure. No, okay. Does he count over here? Does he count over there? It is a very unusual, unique situation that I don't think any of us have ever seen. So how they handle the bookkeeping is a curiosity. But at the end of the day, Brent and Amy Pry are not worried where their next meal is coming from, and they will be fine. And so too will Virginia Tech on the financial side.
The thing is, if this had happened 2 years from now, I think people would have been like, okay, I can see that. Like Vance Joseph is the defensive coordinator again for the Broncos, where he was the head coach a couple years ago and got fired and failed. And he came back, and he's one of the better coordinators in the game right now. That defense is really strong. I have them on my fantasy team. I know this stuff. If James Franklin had been hired by UCLA and hired Brent Pry as his defensive coordinator, nobody would have batted their eyes by it. They would have been like, yeah, that makes sense. They know each other. They have a working relationship. So the only weird thing here is the awkwardness of being back in the building here. If Pry's okay with it and can handle it, and knowing his personality, I feel like he can. I don't feel like he was really bothered by stuff. Like perhaps more bothered by the criticism than he outwardly showed. But, he wasn't like bitter and angry at the end of his run there. He was still upbeat. He was still, hey, let's get this thing turned around. He was still Team Virginia Tech. It wasn't this just acrimonious divorce when they left each other.
Andy, I think what this shows is that Brent Pry's affection for the institution and the program, which goes back to the mid-'90s when he was a GA for Bud and Frank, it's authentic. It's genuine. If it weren't, then this couldn't have happened. I think the experience of running out of that tunnel means the world to him. And seeing him do it again, he won't be the first guy out of the tunnel like he used to be. But coming out of it, that's gonna charge him and ignite him, I think, like nothing else. And oh, by the way, guys, what is one thing, wins and losses aside, what is one thing that Brent Pry was given credit for while at Virginia Tech? He repaired and restored relationships with Virginia high school coaches on the recruiting trail. And now he's going to be back. How can that not help / sustain Virginia Tech's recruiting efforts in the Commonwealth?
It does have a chance to be a very, very cool story. Like if it works out and Virginia Tech wins to the level that some people think it can win at in 2-3 years, if Virginia Tech is in the top 10 with a couple ACC championships in 2028 and Brent Pry is Virginia Tech's defensive coordinator, well, there's an E60 for you right there. Maybe not to that extent, but I think you know what I'm saying right there. Like it's so unprecedented, to your point, Andy, about how soon it is. The only one that I don't want to say seems strange, or the only reason I say it seems strange is because of the timing. The only fired head coach that came back to be an assistant at that school that's like, really? That happened to me? Is Bobby Petrino. The way things ended at Arkansas, and then he comes back to be their offensive coordinator, and then he's their interim head coach this year, and some people wanted him to be the permanent head coach. So it really is truly an unprecedented situation. I was joking with a buddy on the phone last night. I feel like since mid-October, we sat on these podcasts and talked about, if James Franklin were to get hired this week, it'd be so unprecedented. He wasn't hired that week, but you could just kind of label the last 2 months surrounding Virginia Tech football as unprecedented. Everything that has happened, the time in which Brent Pry got fired, when James Franklin got hired, when James Franklin got fired at Penn State, when he got hired at Virginia Tech, the last couple of weeks, Brent Pry now being on his staff. It truly is like a once in a lifetime thing I think we're living through right now. Like it is insane really to truly think about. But I guess back to the financial sense, to further dig deeper into that, Chris brought it up yesterday. Like, are they getting Brent Pry for free? Because now it's like you have that north of $6 million buyout. You're theoretically trimming into the buyout, and then you're not having to pay a defense, or I guess you're having to pay the defensive coordinator because you're trimming into that $6 million buyout. But I assume it would look something like that. But just kind of piggybacking off that financial question, just curious if you had any thoughts there.
I think there will probably be some salary component involved here, but are they probably going to get a discount? Yes, that's my suspicion. But again, I don't know. I should have taken more than 2 semesters of accounting, I guess, to fully understand how this might work.
I'd be surprised if he's just back for free.
Yeah, I would agree.
There's no way, right? Come on.
But it's got to be.
You have some leverage in this thing. It's like, hey, if he wants me as his coordinator, like you don't have to pay me $2 million a season, but pay me something.
It is strange.
And you're not touching the buyout. That would be my other stipulation.
Okay.
The buyout is the buyout. That's in the past, man.
But he's got an offset clause.
Let's look to the future here.
He's got an offset clause with the buyout?
He does have an offset clause.
Okay.
But of
it
course,
is just very strange.
The offset clause, I'm sure, does not mention taking a job at
Virginia Tech.
It just says another coaching opportunity. Yeah. This is another coaching opportunity.
Yeah.
So,
Teel, what do you make in terms of like the relationships? We've all talked to Brent Pry before, and we know how he builds the relationships within the athletic department, within the people around him. He's very well liked. I'm curious, just in terms of him being back in the program now. Do you think there's going to be an awkwardness around it? I mean, I know it certainly takes a lot from his side to come back after being fired, but I wonder about the players, the coaches who remain, the student assistants in the program, everybody around it, the nutrition staff and whatnot. Just the person that is now back was the coach that just got fired. Like awkwardness there? I don't know what you think about that.
I doubt it, David. Number one, the point that Andy made on your pod yesterday, there's going to be so much turnover on the roster and also on the staff that I don't know that Coach Pry's presence in the building will really resonate with them. They think, oh, wow, this is kind of interesting. But I think everyone who knows James Franklin understands to a degree the depth of the relationship with Brent Pry. And to your point, David, I think he is very well regarded in the department because of his affection for the school and the entire athletics endeavor and his support of everyone. And it wasn't like he was just cloistered in the football offices and was never out and about. And there are some coaches who have worked at Virginia Tech who weren't that way. You can all guess those names, but this is someone that is very well regarded and popular in the department, and I think his return will be well received.
What are your thoughts on Ty Howe? New offensive coordinator for the Hokies, first-time offensive coordinator. I think that maybe surprised some people, but you go back into the Penn State well to bring in your new OC, and just kind of curious your overall thoughts.
Now, that one, Carter, did kind of surprise me, just because, as we all know, there are very few human pinatas quite like a Virginia Tech offensive coordinator. And I would have thought, given that history, that maybe James Franklin would look to make a splashier hire on that side of the ball. But he knows Coach Howell and must think the world of him and believe he can do it. We all go back to when Brent Pry was hired, and he's bringing in two inexperienced coordinators in Chris Marv and Tyler Bowen. James Franklin is clearly not a rookie head coach hiring rookie coordinators, but he is hiring essentially a rookie OC who's very young and, yes, did a yeoman's work with Penn State's tight ends, most notably Tyler Warren, a Virginian. But that one kind of surprised me.
Teel, that one recruit said, it feels like it's Penn State 2.0 when describing this thing. And it doesn't sound like he's joking. Like the quarterback's coach sounds like he's coming from Penn State. Pry has the history there. Howell, obviously. What do you think of them recreating this Penn State staff sort of that they had up there? I mean, this was a staff that did get fired up there. They had a lot of good years and then, kind of went off the rails this year.
It went off the rails this year, Andy, but that to me is the outlier. It'd be one thing if 11-2 at Penn State was an outlier. But 11-2 at Penn State became the norm. And you can argue, okay, yes, he was always losing to Ohio State and Michigan. I get that. A lot of folks lose to Ohio State and Michigan a lot. I don't blame James Franklin for wanting to get the band back together because they did some pretty damn good work. And why not try to recreate the staff and the vibe that had the Nittany Lions literally one pass away from the national championship game last season?
Do you think this is a lot? Last year, he invested so much in what was a highly regarded OC in Kotelnicki and a big-time defensive coordinator in Jim Knowles, who he plucked from Ohio State, paid a lot of money. Do you feel like this is him just going back to, hey, these are the guys I trust? Like you said, getting the band back together. I feel like this goes from, hey, we tried to take some risks last year at Penn State. It did not work. We're going to go back to what we know can work.
Yes, I think there is a degree of truth there, David, if not a huge degree of truth. Now, we all know that the best head coaches are open to new ideas and new people and don't always hire their friends. And there is danger in that, in insulating yourself with only those you are familiar with. I think if you want to fault Mike Krzyzewski for the latter years of his tenure at Duke, it was always, we have to have Duke guys sitting next to me on the bench. What was John Shire's first move when he took over? He broadened his horizons. He brought in outsiders to give him a fresh perspective. And not only that, to give the players a fresh outlook. Now, here, Franklin and his staff will be working with new players, not the Penn State team and holdovers there. So I think it's a little different in that regard. But it will be interesting moving forward if, in the natural cycle of things, coaches move on to different places. Will he still insist on ties to him when he looks for replacements, or will he go outside the family, so to speak?
Speaking of inside the family, you mentioned Duke basketball. That's probably what Carolina basketball is dealing with right now to some extent. So I see you nodding your head. Yeah, we'll see what happens with Hubert Davis. The Tar Heels look good so far this year, but quick buy or sell real fast. Virginia Tech, I thought about this question on the fly. Virginia Tech is going to have 60 or more new players in 2026.
You're counting the current signees.
Correct. 60
so they're already
new
at 22.
Players. All right, I'm going to change to 70. Buy or
Whoa,
sell.
you
So-
go.
I'm sorry.
Come on now.
Okay, 60,
Come on now.
60.
60 is a good number, I think.
Okay, all right.
Because didn't UNC bring in like 40 new players last year?
May-
No, Andy, UNC brought in 70.
Okay. So yeah,
New players.
a lot. It's possible. I would buy this one.
Okay.
I just think that they're going to have to. I mean, they're 3-9.
Yeah.
So what are you looking at this roster going? You have to keep this guy. You have to keep this guy. It's like, well, went 3-9 with those guys. What are you going to get? You can do better, I think, if you go out there. Now there are obviously pieces that you want to keep, and young guys certainly big contributors like that. But I think he'll take a holistic look at this roster and go, this was not good enough. I need to do some stuff about this in the portal.
Yeah, I'll buy it. I think the interesting part is last year, Brent Pry and his staff, they brought in 20-something high school kids and then 30-something portal guys. I mean, that was a big haul. And Virginia Tech, he was firing his DC in the process and hiring Sam Cephas, and then had to hire Phil Montgomery to replace Tyler Bowen, who left. It's like, if James Franklin knows exactly how he wants to attack the transfer portal this month before it opens, I think they'll have a good plan. And yeah, you've got to turn over the roster. So I expect there to be a lot. We got to keep track of that number and come back to it.
All right.
Yeah, I would buy 60, sell 70.
Okay, so that was a good line. Okay, all right.
It
North
was.
of 60. Teel, I'm dying to get your take on this. If you guys are ready to move on from some of this coaching staff stuff, if you have anything,
Oh boy, I know where you're going.
Feel free to cut in here. But what's your take on what happened in Charlotte Saturday? I mean, I'm just watching that game, Virginia Duke. I'm like, this is insane what's happening. But Pete, go ACC. And right when we're texting thinking that Duke has it in the bag, you see the last 3 minutes take place and you're like, this is just an utter collapse. And then Virginia ends up losing in overtime. So your reaction to what we saw on Saturday and how it, I guess, transpired when it comes to Selection Sunday with the college football playoff.
Oh, so much to unpack here. And Andy will appreciate this. As I'm going through security at the press entrance Saturday night in Charlotte, who do I run into but Brennan Armstrong? And I should have known my first non-football encounter with Brennan Armstrong in quite some time would then entail a play as bizarre as the lateral to Bobby Haskins in Charlottesville. Because, guys, I really believe the biggest sequence of that game was in overtime on 4th and 2, where Darian Mensah scrambles to his right and is fortunate to find his tight end for the touchdown. But On top of that, James Jackson, the Virginia linebacker, roughs the passer. And I don't know about y'all, but I have never seen, usually that's enforced on the kickoff, but there is no kickoff in overtime. So suddenly Virginia is starting from its own 40. And it seems like Des Kitchens, the OC, panicked.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, we suddenly have 40 yards to go instead of 25. But what difference does it make? You have no clock constraints. You had just on your previous possession drove 96 yards in a $122 to force overtime. Your offense is rolling. Just get first downs. And instead, they try to get cute, and it ends disastrously, just as it did in Charlottesville with the Bobby Haskins play. And it was so sudden and so jarring. And then you end up with Duke, the first 5-loss ACC champion since Wake Forest in 1970. I mean, a 5-loss power conference champion is unfathomable. And that's why no one could have ever dreamed when the powers that be put this playoff format together that there would be not one, but 2 group of 5 champions in the field.
Teel, I want to ask you about that. You got your James Madison sweatshirt on there. What do you think about the Dukes getting into the field here?
Well, the only question, the only debate, Andy, was do you take Duke or JMU? There is no way that the committee could justify putting Duke in the field over when James Madison checked in at number 25 in the rankings, the penultimate week. At that point, I thought at least, Duke is done because you cannot take an unranked Duke team, which was probably, if the committee wanted to go that far, maybe in the 40s rankings wise. This is a team that hasn't sniffed the rankings all year, whose best win was probably Wake Forest, 6-5 at one point before the season finale against Wake. And yes, the ACC and Manny Diaz pointed out, well, Duke has 7 wins over the Power 5 or over the Power 4, and JMU has none. Okay, how many wins does Duke have against the group of 5? They are 0-2 against the group of 5, and James Madison is 12-0. I have seen both teams in person multiple times. JMU is better than Duke.
I thought you were going to say that. And
let me push back on this a little bit. Because I threw this out on Twitter. Sometimes you just can't help yourself. You're like, I don't know. I'm going to throw this out there. It's going to get pushback from stuff. First of all, you say the committee couldn't possibly flip those teams. The committee does whatever it wants. It has no logical, rational thought on this stuff. JMU has beaten nobody this year. Can we agree on that? ODU is their best win, right?
Yeah, probably.
SP and Plus, I think, is like 48th. And people are like, oh, Duke has lost to 2 group of 5 teams. The 2 group of 5 teams they lost to are better than ODU.
That's fair.
I mean, Tulane's a playoff team. UConn was ranked higher in the SP Plus than ODU was. And then you had the other 3 losses that Duke has. All 5 of Duke's losses are higher than the best team that JMU beat. So JMU is walking around going, hey, we're 12-1. What's the 12-1? 11-1? 12-1. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 12-1. It's like, that is an empty calories 12-1. And I'm not saying that Duke should have got in over JMU. I think that the case could be there that, hey, you put JMU in a conference, and all these JMU fans were my mentions, like they could beat all but 2 of the teams in the ACC right now. And I'm like,
they lost to Louisville.
I said, was 7th place Louisville one of the 2? And that ticked them off too. So, sometimes I just like to go and they just like tweak people a little bit, just throw it out there for the argument. They had 1 game against a power conference school like that. And listen, that game was close for a while, and then they lost at the end. But they lost it. And, if Duke lost that game, we'd be using it against them right now. Say, well, like they lost this many 5 games like this. It's like, well, JMU didn't play that many games to have that opportunity to lose it. So I think sometimes these resumes are harder to compare than people are making it out to be. And I hate the arguments like, well, 12-1 versus 8-5. Like there's no argument here. It's like, there is an argument. You have to look at the schedule and how it's done. So I don't have a problem with JMU getting in over Duke. I'm just thinking you could have argued it a little bit more. People could have argued it in that room, and I think it would have been a logical thing to argue.
And we'll never know what if any debate transpired, Andy, when it came down to who should be the number 5 conference champion that receives an automatic bid to the field. Now, no one is questioning Tulane's presence, but how far above James Madison is Tulane in the rankings? Just a couple, right?
I think so.
So I think Tulane, North Texas, and James Madison were all fairly well regarded by the committee. Now, Tulane has not 1 but 2 Power 4 victories. Tulane beat Northwestern, and I forget the other. Duke. Oh, yeah.
Hardly. They beat them by a lot.
Yes.
I think I'm fine with the group of 5 team getting in the playoff. I have a problem with 2 of them. And I think it waters down the playoff. And like there's one spot that they have carved out for this, and they say, hey, this is the don't sue us spot. We don't want to get sued, so we're going to give you this carrot. One group of 5 team gets in. I think they have to have some rule that, like, if you're not in the top 20, you can't get in this playoff. Well, they have the number 23 team in the country in a 12-team playoff. That to me doesn't make sense.
And that's probably
it's
the ACC's fault.
It's absolutely the ACC's fault. I'm not blaming JMU for this whole thing. They got in on the rules as they were. I'm saying that they probably need to tweak these rules to account for the ACC screwing things up and having a 5-loss champion.
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Andy, would you prefer in this case that they continue to have the 5 highest rated conference champions, or would you say if, like with JMU being the second G5 or conference champion in the second group of 5, would you have preferred that spot to go to Notre Dame as an at-large or to Duke as a conference champion?
I mean, I hate to say it because they're being such little whiny people about this, but Notre Dame. I think the playoff would be better if Notre Dame was in it as the 11 seed or whatever they would have been. And then Tulane is the 12. I think that's a better product. Listen, JMU people are going to come after me for saying this. Like, fine, you go out to Oregon, you lose by 30 or whatever the score is going to be. I think it's going to be a blowout. I think Oregon's going to just wipe the floor with them. And that's not going to be indicative of like this whole process was terrible, because all these semi or quarterfinal games have been blowouts so far in the past. Like SMU lost by 4 touchdowns last year to Penn State. That doesn't mean that SMU is not worthy of being in the playoff. I just think going in, I don't see a path to victory for JMU in this game. And I don't think that's what you should be doing once you get to the playoff portion of this. For football, I love it in basketball. And basketball is different, and there's not a physical component, and there's more of a chance for an upset in basketball. If you're just like, on fire, shooting threes, there's more ways to, mitigate the size and speed disadvantage that some of these schools play at. But in football, I kind of sound like Bud Elliott on this. He's been really pounding the table against JMU in the playoff. And again, they got in based on the rules, how they have it, but I think they should tweak the rules that if you're not top 20 as a conference champion, I don't think you should get in.
Well, I think the lesson here, Andy, is that the ACC and the other Power Fives or Power Fours, because they all have the same tiebreaker, they have to change the tiebreaker. You cannot create a situation where, absent head-to-head results, that you have a 5-loss team because of a tiebreaker in your championship game. Just cannot happen. Because if Miami and Virginia had met in the ACC championship game, as we all believe they should have, then the winner is in, and so is Notre Dame. The loser is out, and Notre Dame is in. Because if Virginia had upset Miami That's Miami's third loss and further proof that the Hurricanes are not the team they were back in September or August, I guess it was, when they beat Notre Dame in the season opener. So at that point, I don't think anyone would have argued Notre Dame gets in ahead of Miami.
Teel, you were on the JMU note. You were in Harrisonburg on Friday for that Sun Belt championship. Bob Chesney, he's obviously going to UCLA. He was introduced in the last couple of days. JMU's going to the playoff. This is historic. What was the scene like? What is the vibe around JMU? I mean, kind of a celebratory send-off for Chesney, and now they go over to the West Coast and they got a game to play, but it just seems like he's really going out on a high, and everyone around that program is just really juiced right now. And I think in part because they've already got Billy Napier lined up.
Yeah. Billy Napier, by the way, I wrote down the numbers so I would have them right. And look, I know Billy Napier, who's being introduced today in Harrisonburg this afternoon. And yes, it did not go well at Florida, but my gosh, look at what he did in the Sun Belt at Louisiana. He was 40-12, 27-5 in the league. And in the last 3 years of his 4-year tenure at Louisiana, they were 33-5 and 22-2 in the Sun Belt. That is why Matt Rohn jumped on Billy Napier to replace Bob Chesney. But David, to go back to your question about what Friday night was like, again, such bizarre circumstances, and JMU wins the game as I think we all expected, and we're in post game, and the media's kind of asking about the game, and okay, that's fine, and I'm sitting there going, okay, I've got to be the guy, and I tried to phrase it as delicately as possible, and I just asked him, given what is on the horizon for you and your career, was there extra emotion tonight? And guys, he was great talking about it. And he didn't try to say, oh, that's a conversation for another day. None of that. Talked about his affection for the school and everything it has done for him and the program and all the support they have and how proud he was of everyone. And then to think they have to then pivot to Saturday, wait all day because they all know that Duke has to beat Virginia for them to have any chance. And then that roller coaster of a game. I was talking to Matt Rohn earlier this week, and he said his daughter's drama play at Montevideo Middle School in Rockingham County Saturday night following the Duke UVA game on his phone to try to figure out if they're going to be in the playoff. And then they get home and they're watching the end of the game. And keep in mind, this is the second consecutive Saturday night they've had to go through this, because the week before it was SMU and Cal had to upset SMU because if SMU wins, it's SMU UVA. That shuts out the second group of 5 from the playoff. So for 2 consecutive Saturday nights at darn near midnight, JMU is like rooting like hell for this upset to happen. And in both cases, it happened.
We're going to get plenty more into the playoff talk. And of course, we're going to talk much more about Notre Dame. But for now, let's step aside and come right back and hear from our sponsors at State Farm here at Talking with Teel. Switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights. We switch TV channels. Some of us switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch. But what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, a group of State Farm agents that support TechSideline.com can switch you over to State Farm so you can start saving today. These State Farm agents and their team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. Check out Tech Sideline for the agent in your area. It's easy to switch and save. Just give them a call. When you want the real deal, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. And welcome back to this edition of Talking with Teel, presented by State Farm. Let's get more into the playoff talk. And the one thing so Reese Davis of ESPN did an awesome job, in my opinion, of pushing back on Hunter Yurachek on Sunday afternoon. The one thing, though, that I probably still would have touched on, and of course, I'm not criticizing anything they do on that show, but the one thing I still would have loved to have heard about, and they probably would not have answered this question, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on, because it pertains to the ACC, is if Virginia had beaten Duke this past Saturday in the ACC title game, do you think Miami would have been left out of the playoff? Like, the psychological factor of leaving a power conference out, would that have maybe come into play in that room, do you think?
Psychologically, perhaps, Carter, it should not. I believe both, would have gotten in. Now, maybe that's naive on my part. You could see this coming. They kept moving Notre Dame and Miami closer together. And when the Alabama move happened, Alabama beats Auburn in a sloppy game, and Notre Dame trucks Stanford, but yet Alabama jumped Notre Dame in the rankings that penultimate week. You're like, what are they thinking? And Yurachek's explanation that week was preposterous, but you could see it, and they wanted to make that side-by-side comparison. And I thought the most interesting thing that Yurachek said to Reese Davis was he urged the committee members to rewatch Notre Dame Miami. And if you do that, then you can see that for about 3 quarters, Miami was clearly the better team and then had to hold on. But I was not surprised. I texted somebody at the ACC office Sunday morning and said, I think you're going to get a team in. And they were a little skeptical, but I thought it was going to be Miami.
This just kind of points out just how illogical this whole committee is. Like, the idea of go back and watch the Miami Notre Dame game. It's like, okay, Miami was dominant for 3 quarters. It's a 4-quarter game. And it ended up being a 3-point game at the end. Total yards, I'm looking at here. Miami 339, Notre Dame 314. It's not like this was like the score was deceiving at the end of this one. This ended up being a close game because football games are 4 quarters long. So like that was a very close one. But the whole idea that they ranked early on, Notre Dame was much higher than Miami.
8 spots ahead, Andy. Notre Dame was 10 and Miami was 18 the first week.
That's where they made the initial mistake. And then they started getting closer and closer and closer. And I still don't quite understand the logic that somehow 2 idle teams, they came back to it and they're like, now we have to reevaluate their resumes. They're close enough that we have to compare them. They were close enough before that should have mattered. Like this notion that Notre Dame and Alabama weren't a notch above where Miami was. Like, no, they weren't. Yeah. Because nothing conceivably changed in the next week, and then all of a sudden they're reordered. It doesn't make any sense to me.
That's why, Andy, the show has to go away.
I've been saying that for years, but money.
It's absolutely ridiculous. They paint themselves into a corner, and as the only salient thing that Pete Bavacqua said to Dan Patrick on Monday was, number one, the show is a joke. And number 2, it toys with people's emotions, and it does, and you especially feel for the Notre Dame players because they're just mere pawns in all this, and to think this is just all for content for ESPN. I mean, just stop it. Find content somewhere else, and just. If you want to do a mid-season ranking, fine. The college basketball selection committee doesn't do a mid-season bracket, but it says, okay, if the season ended today, here would be our top 4 seeds in each of the 4 regions. So here's your top 16. Doesn't say who's on the bubble or who's going to get the last at-large or who's going to be a 9 seed in the East. but at least it gives you a little taste. But this notion of trotting out a chairman, who, by the way, has an impossible job, to try to explain the consensus of a room when he doesn't even know how people voted. It's all done privately on your laptop. The guy who's sitting next to you, he doesn't know how you're voting, and vice versa. I've done the mock selection down there in Grapevine. It's a fascinating exercise, but no one knows how everyone else is voting.
This may be true, and the committee is a joke, and the selection shows need to go. But Notre Dame the way they've reacted, they can go cram it with walnuts. Like, this is horrible. This is come on, show some dignity about this being rejected from this thing.
Yeah, Andy, I thought, and I hoped that Monday would be an easy day. It had been quite a week, starting with signing day with y'all. I mean, I confess I was running on fumes, like back-to-back nights of about 2.5 hours sleep, too much time behind the wheel, and Saturday night's drive from Charlotte was through dense fog. I mean, I'm a mess on Monday. And then my phone started blowing up. Pete Bavacqua, Dan Patrick, Pete Bavacqua, Dan Patrick. I'm like, what in the hell? And so I listened to the whole thing. And the more I listened, the angrier I got. And I texted my editor and said, you got a column coming. Ooh. And you talk about tone deaf and entitlement. Please, you are offended. You are mystified that the ACC would lobby for one of its own over you, who has steadfastly refused to join the league all in. Come on now, you can go pound sand. And you're offended by the social media comparison between Miami and Notre Dame. Come on, number one, if you think that some 23-year-old's tweets out of Charlotte are influencing the selection committee, that's absurd. And number two, Notre Dame was the one team standing between Miami and the playoff. Of course, Jim Phillips is going to make that comparison when he does interviews. It would have been malpractice for him not to. So again, for all the ACC has done for Notre Dame, especially in 2020 when they saved their backsides, because Notre Dame had no schedule. The Big Ten, the SEC, the Pac-12, they were all playing conference schedules only. Who the heck was Notre Dame going to play? A bunch of MAC schools? Was that going to get them in the playoff? No. The ACC took him in as a full member. Brian Kelly was ACC Coach of the Year, for heaven's sake. Notre Dame's in the ACC championship game, and even though it lost, it made the 4-team playoff and collected all that playoff money. And you want to all of a sudden bang on the ACC? Just stop.
What did you think of Jim Phillips' response?
I thought Andy had a better idea.
Oh, Michael Corleone?
Yes, sir.
Strictly business, not personal. Mm-hmm. I like in this whole situation, I watch a lot of legal dramas, and invariably there will be an episode where two defense attorneys are on the same side, but they have separate clients and the same defense. The Good Wife did this a lot. The common trope on The Good Wife. And at some point, some piece of evidence will come up and they're like, this will get our client off, but we have to turn against our co-defendant if we do this. And they always do it. They're like, we have to zealously represent our client here. That's what the ACC did in this situation. They supported Miami because that's their client. That is their football playing member. If you want full support, try full membership. That's my whole thought on this whole thing. And that they'll tick Notre Dame fans off, and they're coming in my mentions again. JMU and Notre Dame fans do not like me right now.
Okay.
In the mentions. And it's like, oh, you don't even know why they were independent 100 years ago. They wouldn't let Catholics play against 100 years. Stop it, guys. I don't need your whole history of why you're independent. You're doing it now out of stubbornness and trying to be different and getting it your own way. And to their credit, they have gotten it their own way. Everybody moves, heaven and earth. So Notre Dame gets its own way. Bavacqua let it slip that, if Notre Dame's in the top 12 in the future, they're automatically in the playoffs.
Which is crazy.
What is that? Does UConn have that same protection as an independent? Like, what's going on here with this whole thing? Bill Roth pointed out that 2000, I believe it was, Virginia Tech team that was ranked 5th and got left out of the Fiesta Bowl, I believe it was, and Notre Dame gets in, and they were 10th or 11th or something like that, and got smoked by Oregon State in that game. Where was the outcry nationally for, poor Virginia Tech got left out of that? I think you hear it from Virginia Tech fans, but you don't hear it on a national scale. So I feel like at every point in history, this has worked out in Notre Dame's favor. And the one time it doesn't, they throw a hissy fit about it. They pull out of a bowl game. Like, we're not even going to play in a bowl game. We're going to take our ball and go home here. I think it's just a very childish response to this whole thing.
Yeah.
And of all people, Brent Yormark, the Big 12 commissioner, who is, he's kind of poked at the ACC and calling the Big 12 the number 3 of the P4s and all that. He, in Las Vegas yesterday at the National Football Foundation and all the forums that are held adjacent to it, he's like, what is Pete Bavacqua doing? And he chided him publicly for attacking Jim Phillips.
He called it egregious behavior, right?
Yes, egregious behavior. And oh, by the way, said the committee got it right, even though it left out one of his teams. It left out Brigham Young. And Bavacqua, the only support he's getting here is from diehard leprechauns. That is it.
Is it going to get to a point where Notre Dame's going to have to join a conference? Not because of the playoff situation, but because with all these power conferences going to 9 games, you mentioned, maybe Teel mentioned a minute ago, that in 2020, you're not trying to play the MAC the whole season. Not saying that's going to happen, but if all these power conferences are playing 9 games, how are you going to build a strength of schedule to the point where you can build a playoff resume?
Yeah,
the answer is no. It's not going to force. Because nothing in history has ever forced Notre Dame into a conference.
Okay,
go ahead, Teel.
Yeah. No, they will resist it to their dying breath. Andy's right. Now, at some point, will all the conferences, from a football standpoint, liquidate and form a super league for football, and Notre Dame be part of that? I think that's more likely than to see Notre Dame as a full member of, say, the Big Ten or the SEC. And guys, I do wonder what the future holds for the Notre Dame ACC relationship. Because Bavacqua said on Patrick that this has done permanent damage. And will the Irish try to exit? And there is, I think, a considerable faction of people in the ACC, not fans, mind you. I mean, fans have been done with them for a long time. But I think on the administrative end, there is a certain faction within the league, perhaps larger than we imagine, that would tell them, don't let the door hit you in the backside.
Does Notre Dame think they can find a sweetheart deal like that in another conference? Do they think the Big Ten will do that for them and house all their secondary sports and give them the football autonomy that they desire, like the ACC have? Because I think that's a pretty sweet deal for Notre Dame right now.
No, I think it's a very sweet deal. And guys, let's go back to the expansion debate. When the ACC added Cal, Stanford, and SMU, Notre Dame got a vote in that. And Jack Swarbrick was pounding the table, then the Notre Dame athletic director, pounding the table publicly. Cal and Stanford can't be left out of this. The Pac-12 has splintered. They need a home. The ACC, we in the ACC need to bring them in and throw them a lifeline. Never mind, of course, that Jack Swarbrick is a Stanford law graduate. And oh, by the way, Tim Sands is a 3-time Cal graduate. But Notre Dame got a vote in that. Notre Dame has influence. Who sits on the college football playoff management group? It's all the FBS commissioners and the Notre Dame athletic director. And who sits on the management? I forget how they phrase it, but on the presidential level, it's one president from every conference in the country and the president from Notre Dame. I mean, Notre Dame, college football has been kissing up to Notre Dame for decade after decade. And as Andy said, the one time something went against the Irish, Pete Bavacqua has to throw a fit.
I've seen all these in my mentions of these Notre Dame fans said, oh, well, Notre Dame will just leave the ACC and it'll collapse financially. It's like, do you think that's the biggest problem the ACC has right now? Like its two biggest members are sued the conference previously. The buyouts dropping. Like the time is ticking on the ACC and it's held together by duct tape right now. Like I don't think the Irish leaving all of a sudden is going to like completely collapse the conference.
No.
What do you, Andy mentioned the contract that Bavacqua mentioned, that if Notre Dame is in the top 12, it automatically gets into the playoff. I mean, that just nobody else is making deals like this. I guess technically the power conference teams, the champions are in the top 5, or the top 5, I guess, highest ranked champions period are in. But like Notre Dame's going behind everybody's back to just make a deal saying, hey, we're in no matter what. That just seems like something only Notre Dame could pull off.
Yeah. Now a couple things here, guys. Number one, the leagues agreed to this. It's in the memo of understanding. And Ross Dellinger from Yahoo, who is the gold standard when it comes to reporting on the national business side of college athletics. He was the first to put this out there. But as Ross has reported and also said on podcasts, this rule for Notre Dame applies only if the playoff field is 12 or 14. If the playoff expands to 16, as we all expect it will, then that MOU is null and void. And I would have to believe that, having watched Notre Dame's behavior the last 3 days, that college football writ large would be loath to agree to such a bargain in the future when the field is 16.
Do we think, you mentioned you think it's going to get to 16. What is a good number for this? We can go round table with it. People debate it left and right, and you were mentioning the James Madison point, Andy, and that was more, to me, my understanding of it was an attack on the system. I mean, you were comparing JMU and Duke, but regardless of whether or not JMU or Duke were to get in the college football playoff, you can make the argument, even Virginia, they probably should not be in because they're not the 12 best teams. Tulane, obviously, is not one of the 12 best teams. But part of the point that I got from you is the system is probably not the best it possibly can be right now. So with that being said, what is a good number for the playoff? We debated 4 for a long time. Now we're at 12. People talk about 14. People talk about 16. We debate 68 with the NCAA tournament. What's a good number for the college football playoff, Teel?
I would prefer now that we've been at 12, only for 2 years, I wouldn't mind it staying at 12. But 16 is very appealing, and for a couple of reasons. Number one, it would mean more playoff games on campus. And to me, that is one of the 12-team model's greatest charms. I mean, those playoff games last year in Austin and South Bend and State College, that was so great. You know, let's have more of that. And to think that you could have 8 first-round games on campus, and if they're smart, 4 second-round games on campus before seeding the semis and the final to more traditional bowl venues. So that's number one. And number two, it would be more inclusive. other than Tony Petitti and the Big Ten, the consensus of the commissioners and administrators is 16, again, keeping 5 automatics for the 5 highest rated conference champions, plus 11 at large.
I'm with Teel on that. I like 12. I like that there's still sort of a reward for being one of the top teams in the country and you get that bye. But if it went to 16, I don't feel like I'd be broken up about it. 24, like the Big Ten's thing, is absurd. I saw like a mock set up for that this week, and it's like Pitt's in there. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What are we doing? Pitt was the 24 seed. It's like, we do not need to determine whether Pitt can win a national championship this year. They can't. We've already determined that during the regular season. If you go to 16 and just straight seed it, I mean, in the past, I would have said, no, there's no way you can do that. But look at the teams that it would include this year. It would include Notre Dame, BYU, Texas, maybe Vanderbilt in that group, depending on how you do the automatic bids. The way that talent is being dispersed in college football these days with NIL, and we've seen it, it's brought more teams into the fold. Indiana is number 1. They're the number 1. Indiana football is the number 1 seed.
And Texas Tech is number 4.
Like, it opens up my eyes to the possibility that somebody farther down from these power conference leagues can win this. Now, I don't think a group of 5 team is going to run the table for 4 weeks in something like this. Give them the don't sue us spot. Like, I'm fine with that. But then everything else, rank it based on the top in the rankings, and let's do this thing like a real playoff would. I mean, the NFL wouldn't be like, well, we'll give it to this one, 6-10 team or 6-11 team. I guess sometimes they do that with the divisions that they have like that, but we always look at that and it looks ridiculous once they do it to that. I think if you just rank them 1 to 16, put them in there, nobody gets a bye, very even like that. I think that'd be a good way to do it. I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I like 16 too. I think 12 is fine, but I mean, if you remember last year, like they went away from the 4 byes being the conference champs, which is probably the right thing because Boise State or
Arizona State,
Boise State and Arizona State,
They've tweaked. I mean, they did it one year and they're like, okay, that didn't work. Let's tweak it. And now they've done another year and they're like, okay, we also need to tweak it here. I think if you tweak it enough, you can get it so it's working. I remember the BCS, they changed the BCS like every other year, it felt like, because something popped up. They're like, oh, that was unimaginable that, that's how it would play out.
Yeah. And I think,
guys, here's the dumbest thing about the 12-team model. The 4 best teams don't get to play at all.
Yeah.
Yes, that is very fair.
Yeah,
that is so dumb. Lubbock, Texas, bring back the tortillas, all of it. How great would a playoff game in Lubbock be? And Athens, but between the hedges. Come on, man. What are they thinking?
Indiana was too successful to get a home.
Yes, that's
game.
a crazy way to look at it.
Yeah.
That's true.
I think if you went to 16 this year and you say you still have the 5 highest rated conference champs plus the 11, but I believe JMU would be the 16 seed and Indiana would be the 1 seed.
Yeah, and they'd be playing at Indiana.
JMU at Signetti in Indiana. I mean, who doesn't want that? And I think that also is a reward for the top, right now, as you guys just pointed out, the top 4 highest ranked teams. Yes, you get to go to prestigious bowl games, but I think people would rather play those games on campus. You'd rather number 2 Georgia or whatever, I forget where Georgia.
Ohio State, Georgia. Yeah.
They want to play on campus too. Texas Tech would love to play on campus, and I think a shift there would be great because you allow a couple more teams. It's balanced. It's not, some teams have byes and some teams don't. It's just straight up. It'd be more of a bracket style, like an NCAA tournament where everybody's on an even playing field. And the fact that you get some of those games at home, it would mean the top 8 seeds are at home. Who doesn't want that?
And David, think of the fans.
Oh, yeah.
Think of all the college football asks of its fans. Okay, travel to your conference championship game, and then travel to a couple rounds of the playoffs, and then maybe the national championship. give them some home games, man. Throw a bone to the fans. They're what drives this, for heaven's sake.
And road games for the opposing fans. I'm sure JMU fans would love to go to Bloomington, Indiana.
Shorter trip than going to Eugene.
Yes,
absolutely.
and less expensive.
Absolutely, probably. But I mean, some of the matchups you would get. You mentioned some of the games we had last year, like Tennessee, Ohio State. I know it didn't necessarily turn out to be a great result because it was kind of a blowout, but like that was an insane environment, and Tennessee fans traveled pretty well.
Yes.
Like Indiana, Notre Dame was an awesome environment. Like I think you're going to get, I think, some blowouts regardless of the format. That's just, sometimes football games are a blowout, but I think the more games you can play on home teams' fields it's just better for the sport.
So you mentioned, and last thing I promise, you mentioned group of five inclusion, I should say. I guess group of six now is what it technically is, but you mentioned group of five inclusion. That has obviously been established, and we all kind of talked about that's probably something that should happen to avoid maybe even getting sued. But when you look at the format going forward, do you also like, you mentioned the Notre Dame MOU, do you like that the 4 Power 4 conference champions are going to automatically get a spot now? So like, for instance, starting next year in 2026, Duke, if this season was next year, Duke would have gotten in over JMU this year. Duke would have gotten in over JMU. The 4 Power 4 champions are guaranteed to get a spot starting next year. That was also part of that MOU. So Duke would have gotten a spot in the college football playoff this season if this was 2026. I don't think the ACC is going to ever be in a situation like this again, but do you like that the 4 conference champions from the Power 4 automatically are going to get in?
I like that if they fix their tiebreakers.
Okay.
Yes, you gotta fix it.
Yes.
I mean, if you do what, I think it was the Mountain West, what it did, where they had a 4-way tiebreaker at the top, then they did some combination of rankings, and not the college football rankings, because those come out Tuesday. You can't wait till Tuesday to set your championship game match. But after the final weeks of games, they took all the analytics and those rankings, and they took the 2 highest ranked teams. And if that was the case, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But
and the American did the same.
I mean, that just makes sense. You're putting your 2 best teams forward. I might suggest perhaps they could also do a semifinals round before they get to the ACC championship. I think that would be kind of cool. You could determine the best team that way. But you can't have another situation where a 5-loss team gets into your championship game just to throw a grenade into the whole situation. And you knew it was going to happen. That was the only way the ACC could go once it got to that situation.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if you fix the tiebreakers to where you get down, like instead of, down at the bottom of the tiebreakers is where you factor in what Andy just said. Like where it's not at the top, you still factor in head to head and all that stuff, but you got to break up ties somehow. And I think you should be able to pick out the best team from the tiebreaker and not the team that played the best schedule but lost to them. Like that's kind of what happened with Duke, played Georgia Tech and Virginia but lost both games. Right. And so it's complicated, but I'm sure everybody down in that league office in Charlotte and in the other conferences, they're going to be re-evaluating their tiebreakers in the offseason.
Absolutely. And guys, the real issue here is the conferences are too big. Teams don't play one another enough. And that is what has caused all this. And but that genie is out of the bottle, and there's not much we can do short of a Super League that will solve that.
Who could have seen that coming except everybody that follows college football?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny.
That was not second guess. That was first guessed. It's just like, what? USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten? It makes no sense. Yeah. They're too big.
It's funny we ended up in this situation because it's like, there's this meme. It's like, oh man, I'm going to get the guy who did this. And it's like, we are the guys who did that. Like college football.
Very predictable.
The leagues did it to themselves.
It's the hot dog meme from.
Yes,
it is the hot dog meme.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like the Power Four all sat around and copied off each other's test papers in class.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, they all have the same tiebreaker. How did they all end up here?
Except the ACC still had the worst grades.
That's a great analogy. Yeah, they got a couple answers wrong along the way. couple answers wrong. So
And still got bailed out.
Yeah, well, Miami gets in. So as always, really appreciate your time. Very spirited discussion today. Got into a lot of different topics. So hopefully you have a good next couple of weeks. We look forward to talking next week. And again, appreciate it as always.
Yeah, it was fun, guys.
For the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer, David Teel, for David Cunningham, Andy Bitter, Nick Brown, I'm Carter Hill saying so long from Blacksburg in this edition of Talking with Teel, presented by State Farm. And we'll talk to you very soon.